was not that easy to jump into this new wars, to accept it as such in the Karabakh, which is not so an essential war for France. But I feel personally it was a good opportunity precisely to jump into this new world and to show to everyone, starting from Russia, Turkey, but also the Western partners, that this is the new world and France has to play its role in it. This is not a conflict which is really directly affecting the interests of France, but it was an opportunity for Paris to demonstrate that as a democracy, respectful of the human rights and of the various people, trying to be a positive player, let's say, in the conflict. Discussion at the moment between Yerevan and Ankara are going quite well. There is and we saw what happened with the mission which was sent to the south of Turkey for the earthquake. So there is a goodwill on both sides, but still we understand that at the last minute, if there would be some difficulties, or if Baku would decide to become more violent or to use more force, probably Turkey will side with Baku. So it's not considered as a purely reliable partner. I will be quite critical towards France, and I regret it, because I feel that since the war in 2020, Mr. Macron doesn't have a Caucasian policy. It has more a French policy that used the Caucasus, and it was also used by many French players in the French politics. That's a difficult question, because these two wars somehow are different. They don't have the same origin. Russia doesn't play the same role at all. But I think what is difficult for France, as for other Western countries, is that we don't know how to deal with Russia, and we want to deal with it. I mean, deal in the mean that we have to discuss, and nobody wanted these wars, basically. I mean, in the West, I'm sure about that, but it's difficult. I think for France, when we look at the Karabakh War in 2020, I think it was difficult to really step into this war as finally this is a kind of new war, or a war of the new period in which we live, which is a period of like multipolar centers in the world. It's not anymore the world dominated by the US or even by the West, and I guess for France it was not that easy to jump into this new wars, to accept it as such in the Karabakh, which is not so an essential war for France. But I feel personally it was a good opportunity precisely to jump into this new world and to show to everyone, starting from Russia, Turkey, but also the Western partners, that this is the new world and France has to play its role in it. And I feel France is still not comfortable with that. So the challenges might be this new order. On one side, we can I think we should accept it, because the dominance of only the West in the world is not also, I mean, it can lead to some problems. We saw the mistakes of the US, for example, in the Middle East, back at the very beginning of this century. In the meantime, the meaning of the war in Ukraine, for me, is that the non-democratic world try to impose its own governance agenda to the world. And this is also not acceptable, because most of the people don't want to live in dictatorships and very authoritarian regimes. And I think France is in between, trying to find its place in it, and it remains in a process. Yeah, I think precisely it was an opportunity to jump into it, and to demonstrate first that the positive role that France could play in it, especially when we didn't have, I mean, we French didn't have something at stake. I mean, this is not a conflict which is really directly affecting the interest of France, but it was an opportunity for Paris to demonstrate that as a democracy, respectful of the human rights and of the various people, trying to be a positive player, let's say, in the conflict. And we saw France hesitating during the conflict and after the conflict, sometimes trying to really talk to both sides and lead them to a non-military, non-violent solution. But sometimes, especially for internal French politics, France took more the sides of Armenia, and it was important because Armenia has to be defended. There is no point on that. But in the meantime, it broke the relations, or it made the relations with the Azerbaijani side more difficult, mostly not because of the Karabakh as such, but for internal politics. And I feel in this regard, France lost the opportunity to be a full player in the Karabakh and the post-Karabakh situation, Karabakh conflict and post-Karabakh conflict. And somehow the role was played then by Europe. I think it was a positive role. They did a lot, but again, I think it affected the interest of France because of this difficulty to play fully its role in the diplomatic area after the conflict. You see, you didn't mention, not exactly, you didn't exactly mention one of the key players of the last year, which was the EU. EU played a big role. Now it has a mission, observation mission on the ground, and EU managed to play I think a positive role because it managed to talk to both sides. I mean, the war happened in 2020. The war could happen again. It's still a threat, and for that we have to talk with both sides. And the EU did. Charles Michel, the chairman of the president of the European Council, managed to bring 4 times in Brussels Nicole Pashinyan and Ilham Aliyev. And as I understand and as I know, it was a productive discussion. And both sides tried to really discuss despite the very big difficulty. So here is a big player. Russia remains a player, of course, but we understand that also both Yerevan and Baku can be cautious partly with Russia in this regard. Turkey is a player, despite it is on one side. More obviously, but as I understand, the discussion at the moment between Yerevan and Ankara are going quite well, and there is and we saw what happened with the mission which was sent to the south of Turkey for the earthquake. So there is a goodwill on both sides, but still we understand that at the last minute, if there would be some difficulties, or if Baku would decide to become more violent or to use more force, probably Turkey will side with Baku. So it's not considered as a purely reliable partner, of course, for Armenia. But indeed, this is exactly what I wanted to focus on with my first question. We see that this conflict is a pure conflict of the new world, let's say, of the world multipolar, and we see the different actors or players coming into it, and it is changing because also this multipolar world has its positive and negative sides. The positive side is that everyone is included, so it doesn't let one single player to decide for everyone and making mistakes with no counterpower. But on the other side, it's a more less predictable world. It's a more unstable world, and this is what happened. Russia is not the same player than it was at the end of 2020, for example. Turkey as well. Europe was not really involved and became probably a key player in 2022. The US are a bit aside at the moment, and it can change. Maybe within 6 months it would be different. So again, it can have some positive and negative side for the resolution of the conflict and for the peace in the region. And because it depends on multiple interest that can change over the time. And when you use this word algorithm, I think it is one of the good words because it takes into account all the complexity, but with, again, all the unpredictability of the future. I will be quite critical towards France, and I regret it because I feel that since the war in 2020, Mr. Macron doesn't have a Caucasian policy. It has more a French policy that used the Caucasus. And it was also used by many French players in the French politics. The Armenian diaspora in France and some Armenians in Yerevan, but it is already very different, don't have the same understanding of it, but I think it doesn't help Armenians. And it is even a dangerous game because by overplaying the support to Armenia, because they are like the Christian from the East, so we would be brothers and so on. Every time it happened in the history, that the West just remembers from time to time that we have brothers, Christian brothers in the East, it led to the catastrophe. And it was part of the genocide, which was committed by the Turks, of course, 1 century ago. But still, the game played by the West at the time was really negative. They just remember from time to time that we have Christian friends or brothers in the East or in the Caucasus, for example, just because the real problem was to bother the Sultan, to bother the Turks. And somehow this is what happened now. In the French politics, not only with Mr. Macron, but a lot of people would care about Armenia, about the fate of Armenia, because in reality, behind this is French politics. Behind this is the question of immigration, Muslim immigration. So, to send a signal to the French voters, electorates, because the French agenda is very much set by the far right in France now, since long, by the way, and that it makes the politicians, even the president, to look at the Caucasus through the needs of the French politics, which is to be critical towards immigration, to be tough with Muslim countries, to be tough with Mr. Erdogan, and we have good reasons for that, but not have a genuine interest for Armenia. And I think this is dangerous because the agenda is led by something which is not in the Caucasus. Nobody is really looking in France at the interest of Armenia, for example, not really listening to Mr. Pashinyan, who wants to sign a peace treaty. And this is not exactly what is said in the French politics. For the president, it's certainly a bit different. But the policy or the line which is followed is not really clear. Is it that we want to indeed help Mr. Pashinyan to sign a peace treaty or not? What is the idea of the status of Karabakh, which is a very key issue? It's still something which is not clear. And this is where the decision has to be made. So I don't see really a policy at this level, a Caucasian policy of France. What is one of the lines which is pushed by this internal agenda, and it is good, that is pushing for giving more guarantees to Armenia and to Armenians from Karabakh, but with not really saying where the Armenians from Karabakh should be in the future, in an Azeri state or in an Armenian state or in an independent, maybe not state, but entity for at least the time being, for a few decades, to decide, not us, but the people from the region, what should be the status of Karabakh. I don't see a policy on that. Maybe it's too early, maybe again, because it's determined or it's decided by the French internal political agenda. And this is where I see that there are some dangers. The conflict at the fall of 2020 was 6 months before the French election. So it became a little part, of course, but it became a part of the French election. And now, indeed, it continues also because it was somehow it was hijacked by part of the right side, which indeed wants to go to the identity issues and the place of immigration and Muslims in France and so on. So it continues this way. And you can look at it through the profile of the politicians which are coming to Yerevan. Usually they are seen as the best friend, not only politicians, some journalists, writers, and so on. They are seen by Armenian diaspora and some in Armenia as friends of Armenia. I think they are not friends of Armenia. They are friends of themselves and they are thinking about their political agenda. But Armenia is not taken as such as the subject of interest and to decide the policy. Usually they don't know anything at all about the Caucasus. Certainly, the first impact is that Russia is not that active in the Karabakh post-conflict situation, or let's say post-conflict situation, because of Ukraine. It doesn't have all the resources needed to do so, certainly. So it affects in this way. It affects also in the way that the future of Russia look like uncertain. So certainly when Mr. Aliyev is deciding about the next step, he has to take this into account and he must be cautious, and it is something that he must calculate. And it is very important for him because apparently from his side and the people within the Azeri side and the society, certainly everybody is thinking about 2025, which is within 2 years now. And because of it would be the time to decide if the peacekeeping forces mission has to leave or not this part of the South Caucasus. And this has to be decided 6 months ahead because of the text of the declaration of the 9th of November 2020. So it means next year, somewhere in 1 year, already the discussion has to be really engaged and almost decided. So this is something difficult, of course, for everyone. Probably Russia doesn't want to leave the region. And maybe that's good, at least for the Armenian side. It is important, but much depends of what will be the capacity, the place of Russia on the diplomatic levels regionally and globally. So in this regard, the conflict of Ukraine raises a lot of questions and doesn't give answers at the moment. And the other players, of course, will decide their position, taking into account this, whether it is a Turkey, important player also in Ukraine, and of course in the South Caucasus, the US, Europe, France. So I'm not speaking about Russia. So that's I see only questions at this level for the moment. If we look at the mood of Russia, of course, we understand that they want to keep the control of the near abroad, and Caucasus is important. I always recall that the first war that Mr. Putin did out of his borders is in Georgia, in the South Caucasus. And this is not an accident. This is because Caucasus, before Ukraine, at least in the timing, but is extremely important. And somehow this is the same war that started in 2008 in Georgia and then continued in Ukraine in 2014 and now. So in this regard, Caucasus is part of the same conflict. Karabakh and of course the Karabakh conflict has its own history and its own auto generation, I would say, but for Russia it's part of the big question of its influence in its former colonies and former sphere of influence. So in this regard, of course, Karabakh would be would, as much as they can, it would never be forgotten by the Russians, and they will do everything to remain a player in it. Me, I'm a journalist, so I'm not the one who decides this kind of things. I think indeed that um, um, every every big player has to discuss in this conflict. After all, as I said, it is one of the first conflict of this new multipolar world, and we can listen to this interest, because also Russia, it's not only about Russia, it's also for Armenia. This is the only country which agrees to protect the borders of Armenia in the context of, you know, the difficult relation with the neighbor because of the non-recognition of the genocide 100 years ago, and so on. So maybe yes, it could be a place to discuss all together, together indeed, to both to try to find a solution, to give the guarantees, the security guarantees to Armenian people in Karabakh, but also to the Armenian state, republic, because it is threatened at the moment. Then there are some discussions about, for example, this road going through the south of Armenia, which is not a corridor. And after all, it was signed. Maybe there would be some prospect. It is a difficult corridor. This kind of road is always, of course, difficult and challenge the sovereignty of the country. It was signed. It was in the document of November 2020. So maybe a solution could be given with the help of everyone to give all the guarantees needed by Armenia and Armenians, and both to proceed and to respect what was signed at that moment. I would love to see more pressure from every partners in this discussions to unblock. Indeed, I see some statements, but not big efforts to do so, because I feel that behind this question for Mr. Aliyev, there is the question of the status of Karabakh, and he is going beyond the text of the declaration of November 2020, because it doesn't mention this question of the status. And it is said that it has to be because it's so difficult to be decided and so on. It has to not be decided now and to remain. So Mr. Aliyev is somehow rewriting this declaration. So of course it is unacceptable. It is the use of violence, while there are a lot of means for the discussion, for the diplomacy at this level. Plus, of course, not plus, but first with the fate of the population living in Nagorno-Karabakh. So what's next? I hope there is a what's next, and that all the partners would push more for indeed decide this solution, but not only unblocked. It means also then to be helpful, to help both sides to go forward towards a peace treaty, find solutions. So it's not only about unblocking the corridor, the Lachin corridor, but it is also to try to have a comprehensive approach, which is asked by the local people. I mean, both Armenian and Azeri people, let's say.